Tori Forsyth released her Golden Guitar nominated debut album Dawn of the Dark in 2018, then followed it up with the rock album Provlépseis. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. In 2021, she now has a new country music album, All We Have Is Who We Are. She's already won a Queensland Music Award for a song off this album, so that is a great start, and it is a great album. Hello, Tori.
Hello, thank you so much. And you got that pretty well
Okay.
correct. Provlépseis.
It was the accent on the first D kind of threw me. I was like, what am I meant to do here?
You got it.
But you created this new album, All We Have Is Who We Are, after deciding that you didn't love the process of making, that if you didn't love the process of making music, you'd walk away. And that decision then freed you. And I'm a real believer in the power of making a true decision such as that. And I imagine you felt quite free in your body and your mind after you made that decision and realized that actually, yes, you did want to continue. But I'm wondering how that then played out in your creativity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I I agree with you 100%. As soon as you make a hard choice, it's almost like it opens up all these possibilities, but it frees you to make a true decision. And I think yeah, having that weight lifted off me to be able to just go, you know what, I actually don't have to do this. Like it's a choice. You're doing music because you're wanting to do music. No one's forcing you to do it.
Yeah.
Why are you treating it like that? Why are you treating it like I mean, you're the only person who's putting pressure on you.
Right.
And yes, we do have outside pressure, but it's also our choice to listen to that, right? So, especially
Mm-hmm.
with something like music that is so sacred and it's a creative process, and you know, it's not compulsory. So, as soon as I kind of released the idea that I had to be here doing this, it gave me the opportunity to actually start. I wasn't even listening to music, to be honest. I was so far removed from anything tied to it because I had built this thing in my head. It was almost like a scary monster in my head about the way that it was being run. And all I had to do was just choose differently. I just had to look at it in a different way. And immediately after deciding that I don't actually need to do it, I was able to not only be creative again, but I was able to listen to music that I love, music that inspired me in the first place. It kind of took me back to what I call and reference as my childlike self,
Right.
the child version of me who genuinely just came into this with a love for it. Because I did start this very naive. And I think that once you have a lot of different noise come at you, um, it takes that spirit, that child spirit away from the process, which is kind of, I think, for me personally, the key ingredient and that brings everything to life. So the minute I was able to tap into that again, enjoy it again, not look at it as if it's a do or die thing, it was natural and enjoyable. And yeah, it just expanded my vision of what was possible.
So interesting, those energetic shifts, because like in making that decision, you just essentially flowed your energy in a different direction. And then it seems like you realized that it was in fact limitless in terms of what you could do with it.
Absolutely. And it is, you know, when we think about creativity, it is limitless and it should be considered that way. You shouldn't have to cap it in any kind of way. So, you know, one of the most potent things we can tap into as human beings is creativity, whether it's music, art, whatever the case might be, whether it's, you know, your vision board that you want, you know, to bring things to life in your, you know, reality. Our creativity is like this extremely powerful thing. Why would, you know, to put that false kind of box around it and call it something different? It's,
Mm.
you know, it's so common, but it just takes the power out of it and the magic out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So after you'd made that decision and that energy was flowing in a different way, did you have a sense of which musical direction you wanted to take your next works? Because it didn't necessarily have to be country. You had made a rock album.
Yeah, absolutely. I no, I didn't have anything planned. And I think that was why it was so nice. Like I didn't have to make a country record. Um, and I think by also me making a rock record, also it was like I was already planting the seeds for myself to be able to think of this in a different capacity. I think that subconsciously we do things to get us to a destination, even though I wasn't quite aware of me creating a rock record and what that looked like. I was just doing it because that was what I wanted to do.
Mm.
The the way in which that kind of played out over COVID was not exactly, earth shattering. It didn't make my career go gangbusters or anything, but I can sit here going, I did the exact creative thing that I wanted to do at that time, and I love it. I'm happy with it, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. So I think doing that set me up to be able to get to that moment of I don't have to do this at all actually, and continue on that kind of journey of self-discovery through music and through the creative process. So going back to country, it was more a case of I was experiencing that lifestyle again. During COVID, I was back on my family's farm and I was back, feeding horses every day and just doing farm chores and experiencing life through that lens again, the way that I grew up. And I think that, you know, and whilst I wrote Provlépseis, I was on the road a lot. I was in the city a lot more. I think I'm influenced by my environment. So it felt really natural to go back to country. And I think that lyrically and story wise, I do sit quite comfortably there.
Mm.
But yeah, I just think that giving it's also a bit different from my first release as well. So it's kind of like I do think it's an evolution. I don't think it's necessarily a black and white exiting and leaving and coming back
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
these big jarring like titles for it. I think it's just, oh yeah, this is the next phase of the growth through the creative process, and this is what it sounds like in this chapter of where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
Does
And
that
also,
answer the question?
yeah, absolutely. And also you following your instincts as an artist, as you said, this was, a stepping stone to where you are now. And interestingly, the very next question I had was about you living back on the land and that idea of we hear a lot of talk about being grounded and being earthed and everything, but there is something to be said for being literally grounded and earthed. And as someone who's grown up on the land and has your feet and hands on the land, we know that there's an energy grid in the earth, and that as a creator you can draw on that when you need it.
100%. Like I honestly, I love this conversation so much. It's like tapping into everything I love. Um, yeah. So I think that I don't think I could go back to not having some sort of connection to the earth. I think that it really opened my eyes to how much I need that. I need that grounding. Otherwise, I'll float away.
Right.
I'm a Gemini air sign, so I will be in the clouds if I'm not constantly being very conscious of where I'm placing my energy, where I'm getting my energy from. If I'm around too many people, I get confused at what's mine and what's theirs, and
Right.
I need that constant reminder of who I am in order to be able to show up, not just for myself as a human being, but to be able to produce something creatively that is me and 100% is me. So yeah, I think that was a huge realization, not just for my creativity, but just for me as well. Yeah.
I think also when you're in a line of work, I was going to say job, but doing what you do is more than a job. When you're in a line of work that involves projecting to other people, giving energy to other people, putting on, particularly in performance, not just in putting your songs out into the world, you do need to fill the well, and often that can be done by going into nature.
Yeah, for sure. I think everyone should, who is a creative person, should tap into that because it's available to everybody, and it works. Like it really works being able to just disconnect. I think we have so much noise in our culture today, and we live by these laws of the way the world works. The moment you go out into nature and you're around animals and around, you know, trees, and it gives you that sense of what it really means to be a human being.
Mm.
And you can actually come back and disconnect from all this noise.
Hmm. Now, I saw you playing some songs from this album in a showcase in Sydney last year, and my first impression was that they were really rich, and that was by that point, so that was a few months ago now. And so that kind of richness, I think, comes from spending time with those songs, letting them ferment a bit, letting them marinate a bit, all those sorts of things. I'm wondering if you did spend quite a bit of time with them before you recorded them.
I half. I wrote sometimes the first song in 2020, and that was probably the only song I wrote until I decided to write a record or write again. So that was the only one I really sat with, and that was actually a longer song. It's already quite a long song, but it was like 10 minutes. I had to cut it down to 5. Um, Obviously had a lot to say about the subject. But I think it's kind of 50-50. We did go into the studio pretty immediately when I decided that I was going to make another record. So I kind of wrote the songs. I was sitting down every single day for a few months, just exploring creatively, giving myself little challenges and seeing what kind of came up, and for no reason, just the sheer purpose of creatively exploring. And then once I kind of contacted my label management and started nutting out a plan, it happened quite rapidly. We sat in the studio. I went down to the studio at the Grove for 3 days. We nutted everything out. And then 2 months later, we had recorded the record in 10 days. So it was quite a quick progression of events. But yeah, I love the rawness in which this was created. It was like it was exactly the way it was recorded is exactly how it was written. It was just, let's have a go and see
Right.
what happens. And what you're hearing is the result of that. Just, okay, this is great. Let's go down this road, and just kind of following the breadcrumbs for the song, rather than it being this thought out process, which I hadn't had much to do with the recording process previously.
Mhm.
Whereas on this one, I'm playing on it, so it feels to me a little bit grittier and a bit more raw in its, you know, sound. But it was just a fun way of exploring and having a look, and um, actually starting to experiment with that side of the creative process too.
Hmm. Then I guess what the richness I might have heard was you. Actually, it was you coming to a certain point as an artist and having spent that time with what you wanted to say, and with just all that energetic development, for lack of a better term.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I think if you tapped into that kind of thing, I think you can really feel it. And I think that I know when I listen to music and you kind of going on that experience, and you start to kind of peel back the layers, it can be quite fun to see where an artist has come from and where they're at. And yeah, I 100% think this is the very the realist expression of a messy kind of exploration, you know, and I love that about it.
Now, sometimes, as you said, was the first song written, it was the first single released, it features Shane Nicholson. It's also the song that won you a QMA award recently. So that must have been incredibly gratifying, actually, to have a song actually that's been with you for so long come out and win an award in 2024.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, I mean, I genuinely, and I am glad that the speech doesn't live on the internet because it was a train wreck. But I, I genuinely didn't think I was going to win, and that's not just me going, "Oh, I'm so humbled." Like, I want you, if you saw the speech, you'd realize, oh, yeah, she's telling the truth. She didn't think she was going to win. But um, I was just so stoked. Like, I've never won anything um at all, let alone for my music. So to have, you know, that industry backing,
Mhm.
um, it's pretty cool. It's cool to see that, you know, oh yeah, my song affected a group of people enough to make them want to select it to be an award-winning song, which is,
Mm.
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. No, it looked like a great award show, actually, just from what I was seeing online. I was like, oh, it looked like a fun night all round.
Oh, it was actually so fun. Like um, Miff, I love Miff. So Miff was hosting, Sarah McLeod was there from Super Jesus. Like it was a great night and it was cool to experience so much diversity in the one room. And it was actually like funny. Like the awards were funny and entertaining, and yeah, it was awesome. It was a really good night.
Now, there is a song on the album called Alchemist, and when I was listening to it the first time, that was the song that jumped out at me. Obviously, as one listens to albums again and again, different songs pop out, but that was the one that first stood out, and it made me wonder what alchemies you might have conjured in your life and or in your music.
Oh my gosh, what a question. Um, how do you mean? Like,
Just if there's things that perhaps you haven't been able to explain, even that just like things that turns your life has taken, maybe where you
mm,
thought, oh, I don't think that logically was going to happen, but somehow I've conjured that up, or even in your art, just a song that's come out of nowhere that seems like it might have been magic.
I mean, I feel like this whole record really appeared in that way. I think I will put it down to one of the easier processes I've gone through as far as bringing a record forward. I mean, the record from go to woe hasn't felt like I've been dragging bricks in a bag. It's just been this seamless process. And I don't know if that's for any other reason than it's me that's different, and I think that definitely unlocked a part of me in that releasing of expectation to be able to just settle into the process of what it looks like to release a record. So I think a big part of it was myself, but you know, once you also tap into that for yourself, it kind of opens up a lot of other doors to flow through as well. So the whole process has been great. And I think there's been so many things in my life that have since just releasing a little bit more. I really am a control freak. Like I ask anyone in my band, they will laugh. Like I'm a bit of a psycho. So when it comes
Sorry,
to
every
control,
Gemini I know is like that. I'm not
well,
one, but every Gemini I know.
yeah, me too, actually. Every Gemini I know is exactly the same. But, I've started to release a bit more and just, I wouldn't say I go with the flow by any means, but I'm trying. So I have definitely, I've got a lot more tools in my toolkit to be able to show up in a different way that's not micromanaging my own life, which allows for more flow, more experience to come to me rather than me trying to drag it there by the ears.
Yeah, yeah. Now there is also a line in that song, and it's the second part of what I'm going to read. So is I couldn't be what they wanted. And I think the line is I'm better unheeded than hunted, which is a phenomenal line. And but as you sing it, there's this real lightness to it, and that suggests that being watched comes with, or being seen even comes with a price that you're now not paying.
Small error, like
Oh,
it's unhidden. So
oh,
same
I didn't. Okay.
ballpark, same ballpark.
Same ballpark, yeah.
Yeah,
I like both versions. I like the version I thought it was in your version.
you can have that credit, the lyrical credit. um,
Yeah, it's yeah. So but yes, it does change the meaning. I'm better unhidden than hunted is. It's still that sense. I think the part that I was really interested in was the hunted part.
mm,
Was that you feeling that there had been some kind of, if not active pursuit, but a sense for you that something was after you.
yeah, for sure. And I couldn't be what they wanted. I think it really is interesting the way that how our perception of other people's perception affects
Mhm,
our perception of ourselves. And realistically, we actually have the ability to affect what that looks like if
mhm.
we were to just stop thinking about it so much.
Yeah.
So it's this like self inflicted loop of what we think we should be doing, should be looking like, should be showing up like. how we should be behaving. And then we think that other people are thinking this about us, but they're not. They're thinking about themselves most likely. But when they do think about us, it's what we're putting out, you know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's like that radical responsibility. I think as soon as we take that responsibility for ourselves and say, oh no, I don't actually need to take that on. I think in this particular lyric, my self-perception is the the enemy, right? I felt like I have been almost hunting myself into a corner,
Right.
um, of what I think that everyone thinks, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
and I do think to a degree there is that outside noise, for lack of a better word, of what the industry looks like. And you can't really escape that. It's a collective thing.
Yeah.
You can escape the way that you allow it to affect you,
Hmm.
the way that you allow yourself to be affected by it in the world. So I think you can't change that, but you
Hmm.
can change the way that you respond to it. And yeah, I do believe that that was like um a bit of a mirror,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think in your term radical responsibility, there's a lot there because, to be blunt, for you as a young woman in the music industry and in a role where you're public facing and people have opinions about how you look, how you move, how you act, what you're singing, the river is flowing in that direction of opinion, right? To actually push back against the river takes a
Mm.
lot of effort, and I would imagine over time it becomes exhausting. So the way to combat the exhaustion is, I think, what you've just said, radical responsibility, because the implication in that term is strength and power. Yeah, that's the idea of the radical response is like I am pushing back with.
Chills. I just got chills then when you said that. But it is, for sure. And you can be. I was jaded by it for a long time, and it's not an easy route. Like it's not. You don't just wake up one morning and go, "Oh, I don't care anymore. I don't care what anyone thinks of
Mm,
me." Truth is, like I wake up nearly every third day going, "Oh my God," like I have to show up on the internet and the voices come into your head where it's, you're being affected by the way that the world is. But it's like coming back to what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation. I don't have to do it. I have a choice to be here. How am I going to choose to show up? Am I going to choose to show up? You don't have to show up. You don't have to do it. So
mm,
for me, and this is just my experience, but for me, it's kind of a case of just really always coming back to that key element of, if you're going to show up, what would your future daughter be inspired by?
mm.
And how can your childlike self be inspired by you?
Right.
And what does that look like showing up in this day and age as an artist, as a woman in the music industry? And that for me is that radical responsibility of, okay, I have the responsibility to show up the way that is true to me without getting affected constantly by the outside noise. I don't need to care about what anyone thinks of what I look like, what I say, what I do.
Mm,
um, I just need to care what I think of it, and
mm,
that's the main thing. And like I said, it's a daily thing. It doesn't
mm.
just go away. It's an everyday conversation with yourself, but it gets easier, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a constant practice. I love that idea of how would your childlike self be inspired by you? Because
Mm,
that's again, it's taking it's radical responsibility for self,
mm.
and it's also not saying, oh, I can just behave however I want and everyone has to like me. It's actually no, I need to be in the world in a way that has integrity, so that the child like me would be proud of me in a lot of ways.
100%. Yep.
And I think it actually ties in a little bit to a line I pulled out of Good Enough, which is, I wish I could speak in a way that's been understood. And I do think through this album, that's happening. Or I
Mm.
imagine it's going to happen, but it's because I'm speaking to you ahead of its release.
Well, yes. Thank you. I mean, like when I said earlier about it it felt messy writing this record. It was like pulling parts of every single version of myself that I've ever been, and writing stories for each version of that. So there's a lot of chapters. We're going through a lot of chapters with all these songs, and I'm not necessarily in alignment with that particular song, but there was a version of me who was 100% feeling like I'm not understood and feeling like I'm just up against a brick wall every day. But me now, I have a bit more empathy for that version of myself, and I can kind of reflect a bit more. But yeah, I think it's interesting to hear the songs. I even had someone come up at the awards, ask me about a couple of lyrics and go, "Is this what you meant by this?" And I'm like, "Well, no, but that's what an awesome reflection. Like, if you're seeing that within the song, that's obviously what is for you out of it." So yeah, I do think there's a big period of my life where I didn't feel understood, and I hope that, you know, people who are feeling the same way can see that, yeah, this was a chapter, but hey, towards the end of the record and even amongst the record, there is light at the end of that tunnel. You will feel seen.
Well, because the way you've structured the songs in the album, the penultimate song is Aces and Eights, and then we go into Happy. I do have some questions about both of those songs, but what I found really interesting is that it's sort of this arc through, and I'm just looking at my notes that I've written here. It's like the arc of the album suggested that the first songs were not only about letting go of the past, but establishing the terms of your life now. And then the second last song, Aces and Eights, is a sort of song that had such a tempo that it could have been an album opener, actually, I thought, but you kept it for the second last track. And then it really sets the scene for the last track, which is Happy. And to me, the association seemed to be that happiness comes from taking the gamble on it, as in taking the gamble on being happy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the track list is like most artists are quite intentional about that. So I did want to start off in a positive way, because historically my records have been quite negative. So when we're starting off with All We Are and going in with that, I wanted to set the tone, because the record is a lot more, I want it to be, I want people to walk away from listening to it a lot more uplifted than maybe I would have left them in previous records. So I want to set the tone there, and then it does take you on a bit of a journey to these end two songs, and it's kind of like an exit. So I love that you've kind of made that match, because it's like, no matter what next step we have in our life, there's always that question. Similarly with that, releasing of, am I going to do this again? It's that question, and there's always going to be a right and wrong answer, but you're never going to know what's right or wrong, because you got to make a decision. So getting to that point, making the best choice for yourself, and then going into making decisions that are, aligned with who you are, rather than listening to everybody else, that you can't really go wrong with that. Whether it's the right choice, the wrong choice, if it's aligned with you in that, time of your life, you can't muck that up. And the end goal really is to find, as cheesy as it sounds, peace within yourself, love, happiness, joy, all the things that life has to offer. Because yeah, that's the point of this experience, right? So yeah, I love that you tie that in. Like, that's incredible.
But also, I think it's not cheesy what you just suggested, because I think it's also part of taking radical responsibility, right? Like, if you take responsibility for your own peace and your own happiness, you're not putting that responsibility on people around you. And therefore you're existing in the world, not as an isolated unit, but also, but basically as someone who can then offer whatever they would like to offer without any conditions. So it's you as an artist saying, I've taken responsibility for all of this, and now the art that I'm offering you is of my free will. Just to tie it back into what we were talking about earlier, you came to this project from a place of deciding it was what you really wanted to do, and now you're offering it to the audience as a person who's saying, right, I've taken responsibility for these parts of myself. This is now yours, and actually I don't have any limits on what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's, I think, the best way to create art and release it to the world is like, yep, this is where I was at with it, and now it's yours to interpret, to take on board, to feel something from it, and hopefully it affects someone somewhere in a positive way.
Hmm. Now, in Aces and Eights, there are actually a few lines that I pulled out that I found were really great. And one is, I know it would be fine because it always is. And so now I'm wondering, talking to you, if that was a wish fulfillment exercise or actually that was the place you'd arrived at, was actually, yeah, everything is going to be fine.
Yeah. I think it was wishful at the time. And my circumstances when I wrote that were very different. Life looked very different. I was living in a caravan. When well, I was about to move into a caravan when I wrote that song. So, and I lived in it for 11 months with my partner. So our life looked drastically different for a bit there. And it was it was a case of me kind of squashing everything that I'd known in order to slowly rebuild again. Um, so I think it was definitely wishful thinking. Um, but the good news is everything is. So
They got it worked out.
it's all worked out.
Um, and then also another line was, I'm still trying to catch up with who I know I can be. And I was wondering with that line whether the process of that has been helped by making the album.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that I'm getting closer every day, and I don't necessarily think there's a destination for that. But I think that the closer that we are constantly checking ourselves to align with the version of ourselves that we know that we can be, um, I think that's like with everything that we've just spoken about creatively or otherwise, that's where the magic is. That's where um, we get to experience life in a very different way than what we think maybe where our current experience is giving us.
Yeah. And then the last line from this song I wanted to mention was double all my bets, then sit and wait. And I thought that for you, the doubling of the bets might have been actually making this album. But then I also don't necessarily agree that you're someone who sits and waits. So I think that's like you've doubled the bets and made the album. But then, or maybe it's a like a metaphorical sitting and waiting.
I'm definitely not a waiter. Yeah, I think, but like I said earlier, whilst it's not a natural feeling for me to want to, I want to micromanage everything. And it's been a very big lesson for me to learn that you cannot do that. That's just not how, it's not how this thing works. It's not how things are set up. You know, if you're going to have any kind of dream or goal, there needs to be an element of God, of source, of universe involved to be able to kind of make that happen for you. You're not God. This is like this me talking to myself. You're not the universe. You're not source, whatever you preferably call it.
Mm.
Um, you have to release to a degree to allow things to happen in your favor. And so the sitting and waiting part is just me going, it's kind of just like forcing myself, managing myself to just relax and allow things to happen in their time, like
Mm.
in the way that they're supposed to, rather than try to push it there and make it happen.
Well, not to take us off on too much of a tangent, but in a non-dualism belief system, you are God, you are universe. So non-dualism is the idea that the divine and human are not separate. Actually, so all the most major religions are set up as dualism, which is
Yep.
God source is different to human.
Yep.
Yeah, non-dualism is that you are in fact one, and so therefore source is moving through you, and that you can move it, if that makes sense.
That's very true. That's very true. And I I have heard, like, I've heard that before for sure, that you're part of God and um you're kind of like the paintbrush, if you will, as part of the process of expressing through that. Um So yes, that is a good point.
It's food for thought. As I said, didn't want to take us on too much of a tangent.
Ah, I love that stuff. So you can go on any kind of tangent.
Well, could be here for a while, but I want to bring us to your last song, Happy, because there's a line, the dream's not the dream that I thought it would be, but I actually wonder at this point in your life as an artist whether it's better.
It's so much better. It is so much better than what I thought it was. And it was just a matter of me seeing it differently. You don't need to do it a certain way. The dream can literally be whatever you want it to be. And I'm finally at a point where I see it like that.
I think that is a great point on which to pretty much end the discussion about the album, but I will now talk to you about the shows you have coming up, because I think you have 4 that which you're going to release this album, launch the album.
Yep. Yeah, no, we're so excited. We're so excited to play it. We're playing in Melbourne, Newcastle, Sydney, and Sunshine Coast. Yeah, we're just keen to play it back to back, the whole record, and just get out there again and be in people's presence. Because that's, yeah, I think there's something very magical about that. So I'm very excited.
Yeah. Well, having seen those songs played live last year at the showcase, anyone who gets along to the show is going to enjoy them live as much as they can enjoy them on the album. The album is All We Have Is Who We Are. Tori, congratulations on a wonderful album, and thanks for speaking with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.